What if the real test of your marriage started the moment your wife left town? Daniel believed trust was simple. You love someone. You stay loyal. You move forward. That was how he saw marriage. Clean. Clear. Steady. When Emily told him she had been selected for a 3-week academic program in Vancouver, he was proud. She had worked hard for it. Late nights grading papers. Weekends preparing lectures. This opportunity meant growth. You have to go, Daniel told her, pulling her into a hug in their kitchen in Mississauga. Don't even think twice. I'll miss you, she said softly. I'll survive 3 weeks, he smiled. He didn't know those 3 weeks would feel longer than he expected. 2 days after Emily left, her mother, Margaret, arrived. I don't like the idea of you staying alone, Margaret had said over the phone. It's too quiet. Daniel didn't argue. Margaret had always been composed, observant, a little protective of her daughter. But she had never been unkind. She arrived with one medium suitcase and a polite smile. I won't be in your way, she assured him. Think of me as background noise. The first evening felt normal. She made dinner. They talked about Emily's childhood stories. Daniel laughed at pictures Margaret showed him on her phone. It felt harmless, but the second night, the questions began. Do you ever feel lonely when Emily works late? Margaret asked. Over tea sometimes, Daniel admitted. But we both have careers. It's normal. Margaret nodded slowly, as if filing the answer away. The next day, something unexpected happened. Daniel received a message on Instagram from a woman named Lauren. Her profile picture looked professional. Polished. Hi. I think we met at a finance networking event last year? Daniel frowned. He attended many events. Faces blurred together. He didn't respond. That evening, Margaret sat across from him at the dining table. You're quiet tonight, she observed. Just tired, he replied. Do women ever message you online? She asked casually. Daniel looked up, surprised. Not really. She studied his expression carefully, then smiled faintly. That's good. The question felt random. But it lingered. 2 days later, Margaret's niece Chloe came over. She just moved back from Calgary, Margaret explained. She's trying to reconnect with family. Chloe was friendly. Confident. Around Daniel's age. She asked about his job. Complimented his watch. Laughed easily. You must get bored when Emily travels, Chloe said playfully. I manage, Daniel replied politely. She stayed for dinner. Margaret watched quietly, almost too quietly. Later that night, Daniel received another message from Lauren. Hey, didn't mean to be awkward earlier. Would love to grab coffee and catch up. Daniel felt something off. He still didn't respond. The next morning, Margaret stood at the kitchen counter slicing fruit. You know, she said softly, temptation doesn't always announce itself loudly. Daniel paused. What do you mean? Just something I've learned in life, she replied calmly. The words felt deliberate. By the end of the first week, patterns became clearer. Chloe began texting him occasionally. Coffee sometime? Strictly business advice. He declined politely each time. Margaret noticed. One evening, as Daniel stepped outside to take a call from a client, he returned sooner than expected. He heard Margaret's voice in the kitchen. No, he hasn't replied, she said quietly into her phone. Not once. Daniel froze. Replied to who? He stepped into the kitchen. Margaret ended the call quickly. Everything okay? She asked smoothly. Yeah, he replied, but his chest tightened. That night, he thought carefully. The messages. The questions. Chloe's timing. Margaret's watchful eyes. It didn't feel accidental anymore. It felt structured. The following Saturday, Chloe arrived again. This time with 2 tickets in her hand. Local jazz festival downtown, she said brightly. I hate going alone. Daniel shook his head. I appreciate it, but I'm married. It's just music, she insisted gently. Margaret said nothing. She simply observed. Daniel stood firm. No. Chloe's smile faded for half a second before returning. Your loss, she joked lightly. After she left, Margaret spoke quietly. You're very disciplined. Daniel met her gaze. Why wouldn't I be? She didn't answer. Instead, she poured herself tea and looked out the window. That night, Daniel video called Emily. "I miss you," she said from her hotel room. "Miss you too," he replied. "Mom behaving?" she asked playfully. Daniel hesitated. "She's attentive." Emily laughed. "She worries too much." Daniel considered telling her everything. But nothing had technically happened. No cheating. No betrayal. Just strange circumstances. He stayed silent. The second week began with a final push. Daniel received a friend request from Lauren again. This time with a direct message. "You seem like someone who values loyalty." "That's rare." His heart beat faster. How did she know that? He didn't respond. Minutes later, Margaret entered the living room. "Busy?" she asked. "Not really." She studied him carefully. "Character reveals itself when no one is watching," she said slowly. Daniel felt a shift inside him. This wasn't random, this was intentional. The pieces clicked together. Chloe's visits. Lauren's messages. The overheard phone call. The strange questions. He wasn't just being observed. He was being tested. But why? And how long had it been happening? That evening, Chloe showed up unannounced again. "Last chance for that concert," she smiled. Daniel stood at the doorway. "Calm." "Certain." "No." Margaret rose from her chair. "That's enough," she said firmly. Chloe's expression changed. She grabbed her purse and left without argument. The door closed. Daniel turned slowly toward Margaret. "Enough of what?" he asked quietly. Margaret exhaled. For the first time in 2 weeks, her calm mask slipped. "I needed to know," she said. "Know what?" "If you were worthy of my daughter." The air between them shifted. Daniel felt anger. Confusion. Hurt. "You tested me," he said. Margaret didn't deny it. "For 3 weeks," she replied. Daniel stood still, absorbing the weight of it. Every message, every invitation, every deliberate temptation. It had all been designed, and suddenly, the quiet house didn't feel quiet anymore, because this wasn't about social media or concerts. It was about trust, and someone had decided he needed to prove his. But the real question now was, what would happen when Emily found out? What hurts more, being tempted, or realizing someone never trusted you in the first place? Daniel stood in the living room, staring at Margaret as her words settled between them. "I needed to know if you were worthy of my daughter." The sentence echoed in his mind. Worthy. As if his marriage was an application waiting for approval. "You set this up?" he asked quietly. Margaret did not look away. "Yes." "The messages? Chloe? All of it?" "Yes." Daniel let out a slow breath. Anger rose in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You tried to trap me." "I tried to protect Emily," she replied. "By manipulating me?" Margaret's voice remained steady. "By observing you when you thought no one was watching." Daniel walked toward the window, running a hand through his hair. He replayed every moment in his mind. The random Instagram messages. Chloe's invitations. The overheard phone call. It had all been part of a plan. "You had no right," he said finally. Margaret's expression softened slightly. "When you become a mother, you never stop worrying." "She's not a child," Daniel replied. "She's my wife." Margaret folded her hands. "Emily has been hurt before. Deeply. The last man she trusted betrayed her." "That was years ago," Daniel said. "Pain doesn't follow a schedule," Margaret answered. Daniel turned to face her. "So you decided I might do the same?" "I decided I needed proof that you wouldn't." The words stung more than he expected. For 2 years, he had loved Emily. Supported her career. Built a life with her. And still, he was under suspicion. "You could have asked me directly," he said. Margaret shook her head. "Words are easy. Temptation reveals character." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. "So I was part of an experiment?" "No," she said quietly. "You were part of a test." Silence filled the room. Daniel thought about telling Emily immediately. She was flying home in 4 days. He could call her now. End this secret, but another thought crept in. If Margaret had tested him, did that mean Emily had doubts too? "Does she know?" he asked carefully. Margaret hesitated. "No," she admitted. Daniel's chest tightened. "So this was your idea alone?" Yes. He studied her face, searching for any sign of guilt. Did you think I would fail? He asked. Margaret paused before answering. I didn't know. That honesty hurt. The next morning felt heavy. Margaret moved around the kitchen as if nothing had happened. She brewed coffee. Read the news. Asked about his schedule, Daniel answered politely, but distance had formed. Later that afternoon, Chloe texted him one final time. Sorry if things were weird. No hard feelings. Daniel didn't reply. He felt tired. Not from temptation, but from mistrust. That evening, he made a decision. He would tell Emily everything the moment she returned, not out of revenge, but out of respect. 4 days later, Emily walked through the front door with a bright smile and a suitcase in hand. I'm home, she called. Daniel felt relief seeing her. Real relief. Genuine warmth. He hugged her tightly. I missed you, she whispered. Missed you too, he said, holding her a little longer than usual. Margaret watched from the hallway. Dinner that night was quiet. Emily talked about her classes and workshops. Daniel listened, but tension sat beneath the surface. Margaret excused herself early. When they were finally alone in the bedroom, Emily noticed. You're acting strange, she said gently. What happened? Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. There's something you need to know. Her smile faded. Mom tested me, he said. Emily blinked. Tested you? He explained everything. The fake messages. Chloe's visits. The invitations. The overheard call. Margaret's confession. Emily's face grew pale. She did what? She whispered. I didn't know at first, Daniel continued. But it was planned. Emily stood up slowly. She set you up? Yes. For 3 weeks? Yes. Silence filled the room. Emily sat down beside him, trying to process it. Did you ever? She hesitated, unable to finish the sentence. No, Daniel said firmly. Not once. She searched his eyes. Did you consider it? The question cut deeper. No, he repeated. I felt uncomfortable. Confused. But I never crossed a line. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not from betrayal, but from shock. I can't believe she would do this, she said softly. Daniel nodded. I was more hurt by the lack of trust than the temptation. Emily stood abruptly and walked out of the room. Daniel followed her into the living room, where Margaret sat reading. Is it true? Emily asked her mother, voice trembling. Margaret closed her book slowly. Yes. Why? Emily demanded. I needed to know he wouldn't hurt you. You thought he would? Emily's voice cracked. I didn't know, Margaret replied. Emily shook her head in disbelief. So instead of trusting my choice, you tried to sabotage it? I tried to protect you. By deceiving us? Margaret's calm demeanor wavered for the first time. I was afraid, she admitted. After what happened before, I couldn't risk watching you break again. Emily's voice softened, but her disappointment was clear. You don't protect someone by controlling their life. Margaret stood slowly. I see that now. Daniel remained silent, letting mother and daughter speak. You should have trusted me, Emily said quietly. Not tested him. Margaret's eyes filled with regret. I thought I was being strong for you. You were being afraid, Emily replied. The room felt fragile. Margaret picked up her suitcase from the hallway. I'll give you space, she said. Mom, Emily started, but Margaret shook her head. I need to think about what I've done. The front door closed softly behind her. Emily turned to Daniel. I'm so sorry, she said. For what? For putting you in that position. He shook his head gently. You didn't. But she did it for me. Daniel stepped closer. I'm not angry at you. She looked at him carefully. You're sure? I'm hurt, he admitted. But not because of you. Emily took his hands. Thank you for staying loyal. He smiled faintly. It wasn't a question. She leaned into him, relief mixing with sadness. The test was over, but something else had begun. Because loyalty had been proven, now trust had to be rebuilt, and not between husband and wife, between mother and daughter, and that might be even harder. Can love survive when trust begins to crack from the outside? The house felt quieter after Margaret left. Too quiet. Emily walked from room to room as if something invisible had shifted. Daniel tried to act normal. He made coffee in the morning. Went to work. Texted her during lunch. But something unspoken hovered between them. It was not doubt. It was damage. Emily blamed herself even though she knew she should not. If she hadn't worried about me, she said one evening, staring at the ceiling, none of this would have happened. Daniel turned toward her. This wasn't your fault. She was afraid I'd get hurt again, Emily whispered, and in trying to stop that, she almost caused it, he replied gently. Emily sighed. She had always been close to her mother. After her father passed away, Margaret became her anchor. Her safe place. Now that same person had shaken the foundation of her marriage. A week passed. Margaret did not call. Another week passed. Still silence. Daniel noticed how Emily checked her phone late at night. He noticed how she stared at old photos of them together. Pride was keeping Margaret away. Guilt was keeping Emily quiet. Then, on the 15th day, a message arrived. Can we meet? Just the three of us. Emily read it twice before showing Daniel. Do you want to go? He asked. She hesitated. I don't know. If you're not ready, we don't have to. Emily shook her head. Avoiding it won't fix it. They chose a small cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Public. Calm. Margaret was already there when they arrived. She looked different. Not in appearance, but in posture. Less certain. Less controlled. Thank you for coming, she said softly. They sat down. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. I owe you both an apology. Daniel stayed quiet. Emily nodded slightly. I let my fear guide me, Margaret continued. I convinced myself I was protecting you, Emily. But I crossed a line. You did, Emily said gently, not harshly. Margaret looked at Daniel. And I disrespected you. Daniel met her eyes. You did. She accepted it without defense. I saw what heartbreak did to my daughter once, Margaret said. It changed her. She stopped trusting herself. I told myself I would never let that happen again. Emily reached for her coffee but did not drink it. I needed to learn how to trust again on my own, she said. Not be guarded forever. Margaret's eyes filled with regret. I thought if I tested him, I would feel peace. And did you? Daniel asked calmly. Margaret swallowed. No. I felt worse. That honesty softened the air slightly. I watched you for weeks, Margaret admitted. Waiting for a mistake. Waiting for proof that I was right to worry. And you didn't find any, Emily said. No, Margaret replied. I found loyalty. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness yet. But movement. Margaret continued. When I realized you were stronger than my fears, I didn't know how to admit I was wrong. Emily leaned forward. Mom, you don't get to control my life because you're scared. Margaret nodded slowly. I see that now. Silence settled again, but this time it felt less heavy. Daniel finally spoke. Trust isn't built by traps. It's built by honesty. I know, Margaret said, and if we're going to move forward, Daniel added, there can't be secrets. There won't be, Margaret promised. Emily looked at her mother carefully. Are you saying that because you mean it, or because you're afraid of losing me? Margaret did not hesitate this time. Because I mean it. That answer mattered, but healing is not instant. The weeks that followed were cautious. Margaret visited occasionally. Short dinners. Brief conversations. No tension, but not complete comfort either. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. Daniel came home early and found Emily sitting on the couch, holding an old photo album. Tears rolled quietly down her cheeks. What's wrong? He asked, sitting beside her. She showed him a picture. It was from 5 years ago. Her previous relationship. A man she once planned to marry. I thought I was healed, she whispered. But when Mom tested you, it brought everything back. Daniel felt a sting of sadness. Not jealousy. Just empathy. You never told me how bad it was, he said softly. Emily took a deep breath. He cheated on me for months. Everyone knew except me. I felt foolish. Daniel reached for her hand. You're not foolish. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of you. Of history repeating. He understood then. Margaret's fear had not appeared from nowhere. It had grown from real pain. I can't erase your past, Daniel said. But I can choose our future. Emily leaned against him. I don't want tests. I don't want fear. I just want honesty. You have it, he replied. The next day, Emily called her mother. Can we talk? She asked. Margaret agreed immediately. This time, they met alone. Emily did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply told the truth. I need you in my life, she said. But not as my protector. As my mother. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to stop worrying. You don't have to stop loving, Emily replied. Just stop controlling. Margaret nodded slowly. I will try. Not try, Emily corrected gently. Do. For the first time, Margaret smiled. That evening, Emily returned home lighter. She listened, she told Daniel, and, he asked, she's willing to change. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's a start. But just as things seemed to settle, a new twist arrived. Daniel's phone buzzed late that night. An unknown number. He almost ignored it, but curiosity made him open the message. It was from Chloe. I never told you everything. There's something you should know. Daniel's stomach tightened. He looked at Emily, who was brushing her teeth in the bathroom. 3 weeks of testing were supposed to be over, but maybe something had been left unsaid, and whatever Chloe was about to reveal could change everything again. What if the real test was never about temptation, but about honesty? Daniel stared at the message from Chloe. I never told you everything. There's something you should know. His heart beat faster. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. The test was over. Margaret had confessed. Peace was slowly returning. Why open another door? But secrets had already damaged enough. He refused to let silence create new cracks. He stepped into the kitchen and called the number. Chloe answered on the second ring. I won't take much of your time, she said quickly. Her voice sounded different. Less playful. More serious. What is it? Daniel asked calmly. I didn't agree to help your mother-in-law at first, Chloe said. She approached me through a friend. I said no. Daniel stayed quiet. She told me she was afraid you were seeing someone at work, Chloe continued. She believed she had proof. Daniel's chest tightened. What proof? There was a photo, Chloe said. You and a woman. Outside a restaurant. It looked close. Daniel frowned. Then he remembered. 2 months ago. He had dinner with a colleague, Sarah, after a project deadline. They had laughed about work stress. Someone must have taken the photo at the wrong angle. That was a coworker, Daniel said firmly. Nothing more. I figured, Chloe replied. But Margaret believed it meant something. Why didn't she ask me? Daniel muttered. She thought you would lie, Chloe admitted. The words hurt, but they made sense. Fear had shaped every decision Margaret made. There's something else, Chloe added. After 2 weeks, I told her you never crossed a line. I told her you avoided me. She didn't want to believe it. Daniel felt a mix of frustration and relief, so she continued anyway. Yes. She needed to see it herself. Daniel thanked Chloe and ended the call. When he turned around, Emily was standing in the doorway. She had heard enough to understand. What photo? She asked quietly. He explained everything. The coworker. The misunderstanding. Chloe's confession. Emily listened carefully. She did not look angry. She looked thoughtful. Mom saw something and assumed the worst, she said softly. Yes. And instead of asking, she acted. Yes. Emily sat down slowly. I remember that night. You told me you were out with Sarah and the team. I did. And I trusted you. Daniel felt a wave of gratitude. Thank you. Emily shook her head gently. Trust should be normal, not heroic. The next morning, Emily called her mother again. This time, her voice carried firmness. We need to clear something up, she said. Margaret came over within the hour. Daniel did not avoid the conversation. He placed the printed photo on the table. This is what started everything, right? He asked. Margaret looked at it and nodded slowly. You could have asked, Emily said calmly. I know, Margaret replied. Her voice trembled. I let my imagination decide the truth. Daniel spoke carefully. I understand fear. But fear without conversation becomes accusation. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I see that now. I created a story in my head and treated it like fact. Emily reached for her mother's hand. You raised me to be strong. To speak up. But you didn't give me that chance. Margaret squeezed her hand. I was wrong. There was no drama this time. No shouting. Just honesty. I don't need you to test my husband, Emily continued. I need you to respect him. Margaret turned to Daniel. I do respect you. I just didn't trust my own judgment. That's human, Daniel said quietly. But trust grows when we talk, not when we hide. Margaret nodded. I promise, she said, no more secrets. Days passed. Something changed after that meeting. The tension faded naturally. Margaret no longer hovered. She asked before assuming. She listened more. Daniel noticed small efforts. She invited them both to dinner instead of just Emily. She asked Daniel about his work with genuine interest. She included him, not inspected him. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Margaret spoke softly. You passed a test you never agreed to take, she said. Daniel smiled slightly. I wish it hadn't existed. So do I. She paused. But I'm grateful for the outcome. Daniel looked at Emily, who leaned against him peacefully. So am I, he admitted, because something important had been proven. Not just loyalty. But patience. Communication. Strength under pressure. Later that night, Emily rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. Are we okay? She asked. We are, he answered without hesitation. Completely? He thought for a second. We're stronger. She smiled. Outside, the world felt calm. No hidden messages. No secret plans. Just quiet understanding. Margaret stood at the kitchen window, watching them from inside. Not guarding. Not judging. Just observing with a softer heart. She realized something important. Love cannot be protected by control. It survives through trust, and sometimes, the biggest lesson is not for the couple being tested, but for the one who created the test in the first place. The 3 weeks had started with suspicion, they ended with clarity, and this time, no one was hiding anything. Because the real victory was not about proving faithfulness, it was about choosing honesty when fear tried to take over, and in that choice, their family finally found peace.